Foot, fight!
All right, what is up, Utah fans? This is Joseph back with the Utah Utes Football Digest. And Utah goes down 24-21 to BYU. Yeah, obviously that sucked, right? That was a very tough loss. At the end there, we almost came back, but we needed a pretty miraculous onside kick, which is always very unlikely. But we did hold tough in the game. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts. I think there's a lot of good, a lot of bad. First off, you look at the numbers, guys. Actually, rushing the ball, we ran the ball for 6.1 yards a carry, 37 carries for 226 yards and one touchdown. The bad news is when you really look at the numbers, though, Nakari Rogers and Wayshawn Parker, take a look at their numbers. So they had 9 carries between the two of them, and Wayshawn Parker went for 2.9 yards, and Nakari Rogers went for 2 yards. And those were the only true running back type carries because Daniel Bray, who we'll touch on in a second, was more playing wide receiver and getting wide receiver reverses as his carries, where Nakari Rogers and Wayshawn Parker were really the only guys running between the tackles, right? And so actually running the ball with running backs, we didn't do a very good job today. Between those two guys, we're looking at 2.7 yards a carry, something like that, 2.8 yards a carry. So not a very good job actually running the football, but Jason Beck's offense stayed creative and gave us opportunities to keep moving the ball. And I think Jason Beck overall running the ball and finding a way to get it done actually did a very good job. It did kind of die off with the running in the second half, though. If you look, we had that monster run by Daniel Bray, who himself, just to touch on that real quick, Daniel Bray had a monster game, 10 carries for 121 yards, one touchdown. I mean, he really had a monster game. And even though he had one giant play for about 50 yards or so, that means the other 9 carries were still a total of 70 yards or something like that. He was getting chunk plays. I think anyone watching that game probably had a similar sentiment where it was like, wow, keep feeding this guy. He is making plays. And I would say for the future, very exciting to see what Daniel Bray does and just how good he could be because the kid is looking awesome. That puts him at about 200 rushing yards and a total of 18 carries. So he's averaging over 10 yards a carry, if my math is correct. Very impressive player and excited to see what he does moving forward. And if you look, Daniel Bray actually had more carries at the wide receiver position than both of our other running backs combined. So good thing he had kind of cropped out and made a name for himself heading into this game because our running game could have had significantly less success without him. If you look, he's over half the rushing yards are Daniel Bray. Devin Dampier also made some plays in the rushing game, 64 rushing yards. But I want to touch on something. So I believe we went into halftime with 142 rushing yards, and we finished with 226. And again, Daniel Bray had that 50-yard run. So in the second half, outside of that one big run by Daniel Bray, we really did not do much on the ground. We were struggling quite a bit to move the ball on the ground. Um, it was a tough game in the second half. It felt like we were getting down the field and not scoring. I'll also touch on those fourth down calls. I know those were kind of controversial, and Monday morning quarterbacks are always great, right? Where you can look back at the game after what happened and make the right call. I would say on the 4th and 1 that we went for, I was all about it. On the 4th and 3 that we went for, I wasn't about it. I felt like that was a little too aggressive. We didn't get either one, which was tough, right? That could have been a difference maker in the game. I mean, you look, it was 24-21. We get those 2 field goals, it's 27-21. So is what it is. Also, Mana Carvalho, obviously a really rough play. The punt's coming down and it's about 10 yards in front of him, something like that. And he just kind of sprints up instead of just letting it bounce and fumbles it at a very crucial point right before halftime, gives them the ball right back after we just forced them to punt. that was a tough go. He followed it up with a decent return, but overall, rough look for that kid. That was not a great look. So offensively, I think overall we did a decent job. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to give you guys. I know there was a lot of controversial takes at the end of the game, and there's things I have to touch on just to give you guys my thoughts. But when it comes to our offense, I think overall we saw a pretty good night offensively. You go to team stats. I mean, offensively we went for 470 total yards. It's a lot of yards, and BYU went for 368. So we had 100 more yards than they did. Third down, we were 5 for 12. They were 3 for 12, 1 for 5 on fourth down. They were 1 for 3 on fourth down. So we were better on third down. They were a little better on fourth down. Um, I think the story of the game with the offense, guys, 470 yards. Why the heck do we only have 21 points, right? That's the glaring thing that stood out to me. Again, we mentioned the 2 fourth down calls, but also on top of that, our offense's inability to finish the drives when we had to, right? There was multiple times where we just kind of got towards the end zone. I don't know if I was the only one on that monster run by Daniel Bray when he's rounding that corner. I am just praying that he is able to get that edge and run it in for a touchdown because I didn't have a ton of confidence that our offense was going to be able to punch it in if he didn't make it all the way into the end zone. That was probably the number one reason for the loss tonight was our inability to score in the red zone. I think that was pretty clear. That was pretty evident while you were watching the game. Defensively, we actually played pretty well. They were getting us with the run, but I mean, guys, LJ Martin went into this game averaging 6.4 yards a carry. To think that we are just going to shut this guy down and not give him anything, he went for 4.7 yards a carry, but this is a very high level running back. You can't expect them to not get something, right? Like 122 yards is a lot. And I did feel like as the game got going and we got into that fourth quarter, they were bullying us a little in the run game. And I talked about this in my pregame breakdown, where their rushing game, in my eyes, had a little bit of an edge over our rushing defense. When you looked at their offensive line and you looked at our front seven versus their running game plus offensive line, I felt like they had a little bit of an edge here. And Bear Bachmeyer was a part of that. I mean, that demoralizing kind of final play. Obviously, the game was still somewhat competitive, right? We scored the touchdown at the end, but we did need the touchdown plus an onside kick to get back into that game. But Bear Bachmeyer just, he gets that 3rd and 10. He gets to the first down. We know he missed the sack. He gets the first down. And then our guys wrap him up at about the 5-yard line, and he just kind of drags everyone into the end zone with him. That was a demoralizing play to watch for me. I can only imagine the rest of the team watching that, right? That was tough to see. Just a rough look. They did a good job, guys. I think the number one thing that stood out to me is with BYU, they were pretty much once they were getting down into the red zone, they were finishing their drives better than we were, right? And I'll give Bear Bachmeyer this. You look at the stats, there's nothing super impressive. I mean, 166 passing yards, 64 rushing yards. You look at the difference between him and Devin Dampier. Devin Dampier's stats actually look, you know, in my eyes, more impressive. The same amount of rushing yards, and he had, almost 100 more passing yards. The difference was Bear made plays when they mattered, and our offense didn't. Right, whether that was Devin Dampier or someone else making a play, we just didn't. At least enough to change the game and win us the game. Sad to see. I'm going to give my thoughts on some of those crucial. I already gave my thoughts on the fourth downs. Obviously, there were two. There was a targeting penalty on Lander Barton towards the end of the game in a very, very crucial drive. Um, First off, I thought it was kind of borderline whether or not it was roughing the passer, just being honest with you guys. And then also borderline whether or not it was targeting. I'm not going to say it was egregious one way or the other, but I also think for anyone to act like it was so clear. I didn't agree with that. I don't think he launched at the guy. I think he tried to make a hard tackle, which he definitely did. But I also think it was borderline of whether or not that should have been called. But it got called. It is what it is. My beef when it comes to targeting penalties was that one was not as egregious as the following drive, or I guess 2 drives later, or yeah, the following drive when Utah's on the field And there's that throw on the sideline to Tobias Merriweather. And what's his name? I think, yeah, Tobias Merriweather's on the sideline about to catch the ball. And their corner lights him up. And if there's any definition of a defenseless player, that is it. I'm going to pull up the targeting definition. So, boom, targeting. I just want to show you guys this what ESPN says the targeting rule is, which ESPN is pulling it right from the Big 12. So, all right, share this tab instead. Okay. What is a defenseless player? Okay. The NCAA defines a defenseless player as follows. A player, I'm going to skip this first one because this is what refers to that quarterback one, but a player attempting to catch a forward or backward pass, or a player who has completed the catch but hasn't had ample time to protect themselves or hasn't clearly become the ball carrier yet. Go back and watch that monster hit on Tobias Merriweather and tell me that is not worse targeting that would have happened to what's his name? Bear Bachmeyer. Go watch that hit. He gets lit up on the sideline, clearly a defenseless player. And you know what? I hate targeting. Just so we're all on the same page. I don't think it should be a part of football. I think it just gives offenses too much of an advantage in general, and I don't think it should be a part of football. That's really my opinion on it. I understand why it's there, but I just don't agree that targeting should be a part of football. I also think that if they're going to call that one on Bear, I think the one on Tobias Merriweather was significantly more egregious, and that was not called. And then again, Lander Barton's one loses one of our best defensive players for the rest of that game. Now, I also think it's fair for BYU fans to say some of those, we got three pass interferences at the end of the game. I think one of them was a clear pass interference on that last drive. The first one that was called, I think it was clear pass interference. The second one was kind of iffy, right? I see the case either way. But then the third one was real ticky-tacky. I was shocked that was pass interference. So my thoughts on that. But I really am shocked, one, that it wasn't called. But it was, again, I think the targeting for me, that it was never even reviewed on the sideline when Tobias Merriweather went to make that catch and got just slobber knockered. I'm shocked that wasn't at least reviewed for targeting, because to me, you're going to call targeting. That was clear targeting. Maybe I'm missing something here. Seriously, I like to think I know a lot about football. I watch a ton of football. I make all these breakdowns. If someone knows something that I don't know, I would love to hear it, because the rule prohibits players from initiating forcible contact against an opposing player. That could be leading with the crown of the helmet while making forcible contact, or making forcible contact with the head or neck area of a defenseless opponent with the helmet. It's not in here, but there's also the launching. Anyways, yeah. So officials use instant replay to determine whether the targeting call on the field was correct. Officials look to see if the player leaves their feet to launch themselves at an opponent. That clearly happened, right? It clearly happened in that play. He launches off of his feet to hit Tobias Merriweather. Again, I don't like targeting as a rule. I think it's a bad thing for football. But if you're going to call it one way, you should call it the other way. I thought that was shocking that wasn't at least reviewed. Anyways, guys, I know a lot of people heading into this game, probably, I'm going to switch back over to the stats, didn't give BYU a ton of respect. I picked up on that. Just talking to some people before the game, but also seeing your guys' comments on the video. Some people were kind of more in my boat, and then other people were kind of like, hey, I think we're going to blow them out of the water. I noticed there was a lot of people in that boat, and I was in the boat that it was going to be a very competitive game. I had a 27-24 Utah. It was 24-21 BYU. I expected a competitive game. BYU is a good team, guys. Super, super physical, can run the ball really well. I mean, we have one of the better rushing defenses in the country, and they ran the ball very well against us. They really impressive team, good, strong squad. I thought their defense did very well. I think there's still a lot of what we could just do better in general, right? I think there's a lot of it on us. By the way, shout out to JJ Buchanan. That freaking contested catch that he grabbed where the initial part of the catch, the corner makes it like he gets it and it looks like it's going to be a pick. And then Buchanan just kind of rips it out of his hands and pulls it down. Really, really nice play. Also, this dude right here, Semi Taulanga. What a play by him. That little dump off he caught. They're like 5 yard out. And he's 317 pounds. And he also had the other play where Dampier threw it to him like way behind the line of scrimmage, and then he had to scramble and try to get something. That's why the yards don't look very high. But either way, I thought we did a lot. I think some of our weaknesses got exposed a little bit, and this is something that the PFF grades have been showing, but also I think the film has been showing. Our interior offensive line's ability to get the push up the middle isn't great, right, on run blocking, and I think that's evident, guys. Nakari Rogers and Wayshawn Parker, neither one of them averaged more than 3 yards a carry. I mean, Nakari Rogers only had one carry, but then I think it was evident tonight. We couldn't get much push up the middle in short yardage situations, and I think that stood out. I also think there was what also stood out to me was the opposite on Utah's team, where our defensive interior line got pushed a little bit between, up the middle, and they were able to get a lot of yards up the gut. I remember that stat came up on the screen. I don't know if you guys remember this during the game, but they were showing like basically all their rushing yards were up the middle. At one point in the game, it was like they had like 15 on each outside and then 100 up the middle. It was like, 70-30, something like that, or 80-30. So either way, guys, just moving forward, what are my like kind of closing thoughts on what happens to Utah from here on out? The season's not over. We're 5-2. I know it feels that way, and I do think losing to BYU does mean a little more when you factor in the recruiting aspect and all that. Like losing to BYU sucks. Trust me, I get that. Um, but I do think that so much is ahead of us. Don't forget, guys, when we wound up beating, or when we had our crazy season where Cam Rising came on and did so much. And I know we always refer back to that, but I do think it's worth remembering. We were 1-2, I believe, right? So things looked a lot worse. I know we didn't have two conference losses; they were both out of conference losses, but still, right? Things were rough to start the season. We've got a ton ahead of us, guys. Texas Tech just got a loss. I think BYU is. I expected this to be very competitive. And guys, don't forget, this is the most intense rivalry. It's one of the best rivalries in all of college football, and it was at Provo. Like, don't not factor that in. We caught a lot of penalties, right? And I'm sure the crowd played a factor into that. I mean, it was it was at Provo, and I mean, you do this in Salt Lake, maybe that score is a little different, right? Maybe that is 27-24 in Salt Lake. I think BYU's a little better than what I thought, but I thought Utah did a good job overall, guys. I mean, I thought some of the receivers stepped up. That catch by Larry Simmons on the sideline, that was really nice. Again, that J.J. Buchanan catch. Ryan Davis was very active all night. Dallin Bentley, a bunch of catches as well. I mean, I think there's a lot to be happy about, a lot that could improve. I still think we're a good to very good team, and I think we're gonna do some good things throughout the rest of the season. Is our ceiling as high as it was heading into tonight? No, but I think BYU is a good team, and we took it to them at home. We gave them a ride, and we almost came out with the win. I think a lot of penalties did not go our way. I think there was some rough calls. That's not why we lost the game. I want to be clear of that. I do think there were some bad calls, but you don't keep it close enough to let the refs affect the outcome. That's always the rule, right? You don't keep it close enough to let the refs affect the outcome. Um, I'm just excited for us to bounce back and hopefully, get a W. I think who's up next? It's either Cincinnati or Colorado. It's one of those two. Let me take a look. Utah football. I should have it memorized, huh? Let's see. Utah football. Um, Sorry, I don't know. It's not pulling up the. I mean, it's definitely one of those two. Okay. Yep, next up we got Colorado, and it looks like that one will be at home. So both of our next two games, Colorado and Cincinnati, are at home. Cincinnati's looking pretty decent. And Colorado, not terrible either. I mean, we got a stretch here, guys. Colorado, Cincinnati, at Baylor, at home against Kansas State, at Kansas. So, I mean, guys, if at the end of the season we run the gambit from here on out and we're 10-2 to end the year with only 2 conference losses, there's still a lot of football left to be played, guys. Still a lot of football left to be played. Texas Tech has a loss now after that Arizona State game, and we still got a lot to look forward to. So I know things didn't go the way we thought they would tonight. I wish it went a little better, but I want you guys to know that there was a lot to improve, but there were some really good things as well. I think some of our players stepped up and made some plays. Daniel Bray, I mean, just amazing. 10 carries, 121 yards. Can't ask for much more than that. He's coming on. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. We'll do it, in the deep dive breakdown for next week's game. We'll talk more about Utah's players and all that stuff. I want to know what you guys are thinking. Comment down below, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. I'm out of here. Go Utes.
Hut! Hut! Fight!